Alright, in the last lesson I introduced the pandas timestamp object, which is basically a single moment in time. And in this lesson I'll introduce the DateTimeIndex object, which is basically just a collection of pandas timestamps. So let's begin by creating a list. I'm going to call it dates. And I'm just going to put a bunch of strings in here. Let's do January 2nd, 2016. Let's do my birthday, April 12th, 2016. And let's also do something a little bit before that, 2009, 09, 07, September 7th, 2009. Now, if I call the DateTimeIndex constructor method, it's called directly on pandas. So we're once again going to write pd dot. I'm just going to put in that capital DA. Let's take a look. There it is, DateTimeIndex. And I'm going to provide it this Python list of strings as an argument. And what it's going to do is basically create a object to store all of those dates. So it's going to do two things. First, it's going to convert those strings into pandas timestamps. And then it's going to store all those timestamps in a new object, which is what our DateTimeIndex is. So when I execute this, you can see here it says DateTimeIndex as our object. Within we have these four dates, or three dates rather, and you can see that the data type or the D type is DateTime64, so it's no longer a string. And I can prove that this is in fact a DateTimeIndex by passing this object into the built-in Python type function. There you can see it is in fact a DateTimeIndex. And of course, if I modify the way that this is written, let's say I do slashes here instead of dashes, slashes instead of dashes. For all the poets out there, and I execute it this way, you can see that it's converted those strings to timestamps and it's defaulted to its traditional format, which includes dashes as the kind of the standard aesthetic look. So you can see it's converted them into datetime objects and placed them within this pandas object for working with multiple timestamps. And of course, we can similarly feed the DateTimeIndex constructor a list of something like Python date or datetime objects. So I'm going to overwrite what's in my dates variable with a new list. Let's use the Python datetime module to create a few dates. Let's do January 1st, 2016. Let's do 1994. Let's do June 13th. And let's do another one, 2003, December 29th. So here I have a new list of Python date objects. I'm once again going to call PD, search for that DateTimeIndex constructor method. It expects an argument, which is going to be what it's going to convert to a pandas DateTimeIndex. I'm going to give it my Python list. It's going to convert those date objects into pandas timestamp objects, and also bundle them up within this DateTimeIndex to store them all as one. And as you can probably tell by the name, the real ideal usage of this is for this DateTimeIndex to serve as the index of one of our pandas objects, such as, let's say, a series or a data frame. So let's go ahead and create a series and set this DateTimeIndex as its index. Predictably, when you're working with typical data sets, you're not going to be just creating DateTimeIndex just because. You're really going to be doing it in order to convert something like strings into date objects in order to put it into something like the index so you can easily extract it or extract, from one date to another, from one year to another, that kind of stuff. So let's begin by just creating a list of values. This will serve as the data for our data, or rather, let's create a series. So I'm going to create a list to serve as the values for my series. I'm going to call the variable values. I'm just going to give it 3 random arbitrary numbers. Let's do 100, 200, and 300. And as you may recall, we can call the series constructor method directly on our pandas library. And as we can see, our very first parameter is data. To data, we can give values. And then we're also going to have to store this DateTimeIndex that we've generated to a variable so that we can use it. So what I'm actually going to do is store this to a variable. Let's call it, let's do DTIndex. All right, and I'm going to look at my second parameter here. It's called index, and I'm going to give it that DTIndex. Make sure you execute the cell just to make sure that this goes through, and now our DTIndex variable is storing that DateTimeIndex object. And when I execute this, we can see that those date times, or those pandas timestamps rather, now have been assigned as the index labels of my new series, and those values from my values list have become the values in my data frame. So that's basically the DateTimeIndex object, a little bit on how it operates. All that it basically is just a box or a container for multiple pandas timestamps. So that's a quick introduction to DateTimeIndex.